Welcome to Responsible AI in Action. I'm your host, Charles Dimov, CMO of Gamma.ai, the leader in responsible AI systems. This is a Responsible AI in Action video cast series where we speak with leaders in the AI industry about the latest developments, challenges, and practical solutions available today. As always, we keep the conversations sharp and focused within about 15 to 20 minutes. With me today is Scott Campbell, Professor of Marketing at Seneca College in Toronto. Welcome, Scott. Why don't we jump right in? So, Scott, I appreciate your being with me. And to begin with, the first question I've got for you is AI in education. It's a hot topic, and may I even suggest that it's in certain spheres it's a little bit controversial, right? Because one starts thinking about saying, "Oh yeah, students using AI to cheat on exams and stuff like that." So, anyway, hot topic, regardless, one way or the other. You have been studying this in depth for a couple of years now, and what specifically can you tell us about the initiatives that you've been driving at Seneca College to implement maybe a responsible integrated AI tool into the classroom experience?
Yeah, thanks for having me here to talk about AI for sure. Well, I took formally 1 year away from teaching basically to study and research AI in education and marketing education specifically. So it is a hot topic. There's things that Seneca's
Mm,
doing, there's things that, I'm doing. And,
mm,
and basically I learned a lot in the last year. It depends. I mean, professors and faculty are using AI, generative AI, basically, behind the scenes a bit, like curriculum
mhm,
development and lesson planning and
mhm.
developing multiple choice quizzes. But I wanted to take it really to the students and actually in the classroom. And I've done everything from, you know, just even collecting like their information and of course disguising the names, putting that in AI through again collecting a bunch of data on them in terms of how they like to study, etc., as a way for me to kind of get to know them better. But I've also used it, of course, in the classroom in just kind of like learning exercises, sort of showing them, okay, let's do it this way. Now I want you to kind of enhance it, improve it using AI. I just did that a few weeks ago and learning about marketing services. I've recorded conversation, I recorded the classroom, even when it's not a online course. I've recorded it in person and then dumped my slides and then also the recording into Notebook LM, a Google product. And basically it spits out an audio overview and then, ends up being about 15 minutes. And as you probably heard, it's two podcasters sort of talking back and forth, and they sound way more interesting than I even do.
Ah,
And it's like 99% accurate.
yeah.
And then, of course, again, sort of establishing guardrails of where they can use AI in an assignment that's asynchronous and where they can't. And Seneca's doing some amazing things as well. They actually have a contained system basically where you, as a professor, can put in your slides, lecture notes, assignments, and then the student can use that to ask it just like any LLM. But obviously, it only goes after what's actually in that container. It's not
Mm,
going anywhere
mm.
else. So the answers, obviously, so it completely takes out hallucinations and it's extremely accurate. And it's a fast way for students to kind of interact and get the information they want. So lots of different things that we're always experimenting with.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. So you're actually adding in, I don't know, the Cole's Notes version of the course that you're teaching, which is great. That's a real benefit for the students, absolutely. And they've got the audio, basically a little bit of a podcast on it,
Hmm.
quick summary. Nice. So let me ask you another question here. So how about how do you see AI reshaping the role of the professor? I mean, you've told us about these kind of the Cole's Notes version, for example, that you've got going. So that sounds like it's adding more work to your to your schedule. But let me hold off on that. So again, the question is how do you see AI reshaping the role of the professor, especially in areas like research, content creation, and student assessments?
Yeah, I think specifically with content creation, again, creating assessments is always is just such a chore sometimes because
Yeah.
it used to be it's sort of almost things like I can't imagine doing this pre-AI because
Mm.
just the like 3 weeks ago I kept thinking because now we're up against obviously wanting to have students to use AI in the right way, the most responsible way, obviously not just as a crutch or obviously quote unquote to cheat and just kind of like take a lazy way out. But I kept thinking in my head, how can I create this assignment that's also going to get them off their screens and go talk to real marketers and kind of get in the trenches of marketing. And so I kept thinking about this, and And I got to a point, I'm like, okay, now it's the point in which I'm going to go and ask AI. I mean, some professors could, you can actually brainstorm with the AI and kind of go back and forth,
Mhm.
back and forth. I
Mhm.
didn't use it that way. And
Mhm.
I said, here's what I'm thinking. Really had it thought through in my head, but what do you think? And can you create the assignment for me? And obviously within seconds, it creates this assignment. And then I
Yeah.
say, okay, what about this? What about that? But I got to a really good spot very quickly, although it had been weeks of me kind of thinking about it. And basically, the assignment was for the student, it's an intro marketing course, for the student to go interview a consumer and
Mhm.
basically find out kind of about the stages they went through in terms of buying something significant. And I told them it had to be somebody, they had to record it on a video in person, 10 minutes. And it can't be somebody that's a student or somebody in your same like demographic. It's got to be somebody, an uncle or a neighbor that's much older and bought something. So, but then I said you can use AI to help prepare for the interview with questions
Yeah.
or a script or something
Yeah.
like that. But this
Excellent.
kind of gets them off the screen. But that's one way. So creating assessments is big. Of course, any of the content. I found that other professors have told me that finding like really good examples for their own class and
Mhm.
own sort of
Mhm.
teaching helps a lot. Before it was always Google or your own observations, but again, AI can kind of do that a lot. So it is like really a thinking partner. It is sort of a graduate student on your side as an assistant, and that's
Mhm.
that's the way I think everybody should use AI just to kind of support you in any of your teaching practices.
Yeah, I like that concept of it being a kind of a thinking partner
Mhm.
because yeah, that completely makes sense. I think I was having a conversation with I can't remember who it was, but we were chatting about well, as a to use that idea about a thinking partner, do I get worried about something like spell check? Spell check might have AI in it built in, or grammar check is probably doing AI, but that doesn't really bother me because it's like, well, okay, whatever, it's fine. So in the same similar respect, I love that idea, but it's saying here's a wonderful tool that it can actually help me and refine what I'm working on and stuff as a professor, kind of conveying that to the students and stuff. Nice.
I
Many
think it's
students
also
have,
sorry, the
yeah,
one
sorry.
caveat is it's a
Yeah.
thinking partner, but you're still the boss. So,
Yes.
it's kind of like the fine line, like they're a collaborator, but like you kind of make the final call. And
Yeah.
obviously, and we've talked about this before, is like never kind of giving up your agency. Like you lean on it,
Yeah.
you support it, but like at the end of the day, you kind of make the final, you're sort of responsible for the final decision. I mean, and
Yeah.
by the way, I was very transparent with my students. I said, to let you know, and I gave them a disclaimer, I used AI to help this. Of course, these were my ideas. I refined it. I make the final call. But, it wasn't like I just kind of crafted this myself. And I think sort of showing that transparency
Hmm.
actually
Hmm.
has them go, yeah, okay, cool. Because that's like how you want to model like good behavior, I
Hmm.
think, is in how
Hmm.
you use
Hmm.
AI.
Yeah, I like that idea as well. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a good idea to model the good behavior and show the student saying, if I used it, I'm kind of expecting that you're probably going to use it as well, but don't just do a cut and paste. So, which actually kind of leads into the next question that I had for you. So, a lot of students do kind of think of common AI systems as a bit of a source of junk sometimes. So, maybe they might consider it untrustworthy. Partially because of all the hallucination problems we have. Part of it is also that LLMs today they don't necessarily have judgment to recognize that hey, this is a white supremacist site, or this is I just sourced this from a Nazi location, or completely bigoted site, etc. So it's just looking at the entire world as data, and it just sort of pulls in data. Now, how can you how can educators specifically help students critically evaluate AI outputs and leverage it rather than just doing cut and paste jobs?
Yeah, I mean, this gets down to, I think, something that educators all at any level need to teach students. It's really hard is to teach critical thinking and teach judgment and to, not trust everything and, media literacy and information literacy. So it's like a continual challenge, I would say for sure. I'm teaching a course just on this very topic. Students do have either students are not thinking about it at all. There's those students, and there's some students, yeah, they're like skeptical or like not trustworthy or thinking it is junk. But I mean, there is a lot of good stuff that comes from it too. And
Yeah.
so there is a
Oh,
model. I've
totally.
talked to you about this as well. It's called the model. It's actually was founded, I found out, by an academic, like a librarian in a university, sort of got frustrated in terms of trying to teach like students how do you, and this doesn't have to be just AI, it could be anything that you find, any information, internet, anything at all. And it stands for, is the information data, is it current, is it relevant, the authority, accuracy, and also its purpose, meaning like, was it informational, was it promotional? Because there's a lot of biases obviously depending
Sure.
on the source. So
Totally.
that's
Yes.
one way of doing it, and having a certain model. I think you really just need to kind of question everything, and of course look at multiple different sources, not just that one source, and not just
Mhm,
stop and
mhm,
accept it. So you have to kind of, this comes with experience, of course, too,
mhm,
with
mhm.
students, but again, being involved and not just kind of like giving up all of your thought processes and decision
Right.
making and
Mhm.
agency kind of over to the machine. I think if you do that, if that's what you're wanting to do, then you're going to succumb to like a lot of false information and hallucinations, etc. So I also think too that you have to kind of go in using AI with like, how am I going to use this? So is if I'm just I've read before, and this is really interesting, that hallucinations actually can be a feature, not a bug, because if you're doing
Mhm,
creative work, right? Because like the ability for it
mhm.
to hallucinate comes up with a lot of creative ideas, but
Right.
it may not be accurate. So if you're kind of going in it as like a research tool, then obviously you're going to lean on the accuracy. You're going to need that thinking. If you're going in kind of more as a creative tool, you can have a more of an open mind and kind of be
Right.
willing to accept certain things and
Yeah.
sort of accept hallucinations because it might not be such a bad thing. So it also
Yeah.
depends on kind of like the purpose and how you're using it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that, in fact, it's kind of funny because I've been reading more and more about composite AI technology. So, in other words, the kind of a bit of a realization saying, yeah, some of the, large language models, for example, are excellent at creativity and kind of coming up with
Mhm.
new things. And yes, they hallucinate, and maybe, and to your point, maybe that's good for the creativity element. And then using other AIs for, like machine learning models or knowledge graph AI technology for maybe more deterministic stuff where it's like, nope, I need the exact right answer. I need
Mhm.
accuracy, et cetera. So that's interesting. From your perspective, what does human in the loop mean in an educational context? And does it ensure responsible AI adoption in the classroom? So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, human in loop is good. And by the way, a lot of companies are continuing to use this term AI
Mhm,
first. And there's a
mhm,
podcaster I listened to, and he got me thinking too. It's like that scares a lot of people, and
mhm.
I almost turn it around and think that where I teach at Seneca and kind of my own beliefs, it's like you should almost turn around to like human first, AI forward, or human
Right.
first, kind of AI
Oh, yeah.
second,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not forget about that. And like, yeah, human in the loop basically is obviously ensuring that again you're verifying, you're kind of like there with the steps. You get an AI output, you're looking at it, you obviously have some kind of context. And that's another thing I teach, by the way, I try to teach, is that it's so different than like a search browser like Google, where basically it's kind of like it's static. You ask one question, you get an output, and then
Yeah.
you might go to a different tab and ask a different question, and kind of that's the way we used to do things. But now it's a lot more conversational, kind of back and forth, and like
Mhm.
teaching students that it's not just one shot. It's like, how do you kind of follow up to the conversation and dig deeper and
Right.
go off in different tangents, etc. I mean, they may be getting used to that because obviously, like even in Google, you get your AI answer, and then you can dive deeper into AI if you want. But I mean, human in the loop is critical. I think unless if you're setting up something for automation, you can, and that's like the agentic AI. You can kind of at some point
Right.
probably let
Right.
that go. You need to still come back, I think, either as a
Mhm.
human, but in these early days at least, too, I think it's really important. That's going to be a challenge, I think, for a lot of businesses and teachers and students, because there's just going to be so much trust. Hallucinations are going down, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
generally. So it's like there might be this sort of, oh, we can back off right now too. We don't need the human in the loop as much, but I think that's dangerous.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I like the idea that there's a person, at least on the more important stuff. If it's
Yeah.
unimportant, it's not a big deal. But But certainly, yeah, there are certain aspects that are pretty critical. Like, do you want to know that uh, a nuclear engineer working in a power plant is kind of looking stuff up and you're kind of thinking, well, did it source the information from the right place, or is this accurate or not and stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I totally get it.
for
I totally
sure.
get
And in academics, by the way, so I remember a teacher came to me one time and said, like, I'm so frustrated students are using AI for their like
it. Yes.
integrated marketing communications plan. And it's like, it's all AI. And I go, maybe we should separate this a bit because, oh, they used AI in the history. I'm like, well, is that really that bad? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
they should check it and make sure it's
Mhm.
not completely made up. But like, the history is the history. And that's not as critical to your point about like, a nuclear engineer, like you kind of want to make sure it's not like just, run by machines.
Yeah.
And even like as a pilot in an airplane, it's like, what is it, 80-90% of the plane is done by autopilot. But like you need it's
Mhm.
kind of, there's a
Mhm.
good example of human in the loop that's not AI because
Right. Right.
like you still got a human involved, but yet the AI is doing a lot of the machines doing a lot of the work, but the humans
Yeah.
there for like the nuanced critical things that when they can kind of go wrong. So anyway, my,
Yeah.
my point on the assignment was like, okay, sure they can use AI in the history, no big deal. But like when it comes to again judgment and recommendations, like that's when like you should really be assessing the student that they're just not getting AI to do it, that they actually
Mhm.
have some
Mhm.
thought in there. And so you kind of want to balance it out a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. Last question for you, Scott. So, as a professor, what advice have you got that you give to your budding young students just learning about marketing, business, and this frankly this exciting new realm of AI technology as well? So, are you gloomy or are you optimistic about the evolving working world of business? So, as an example, we've all seen how many articles out there about saying, "Oh my God, the world's gonna." Or we're all going to lose our jobs, for example. Fortunately, I'm seeing more articles coming out saying, well, you know what? There's new roles coming up because of AI, and don't be totally gloomy. There's some light at the end of the tunnel as well. So, what's your perspective on that, and what do you recommend to your students, or what guidance do you give to them?
Yeah, no, so I mean, it depends on the day. When I was doing my one
Yeah.
year professional development, there was some days at the end of the day, like I just got to go for a walk and kind of
Uh-huh.
think about things. I was kind of like hearing a lot of stuff and seeing the technologies and especially with video, I was like, blown away about what the technology can do and what does this mean. So
Mm-hmm.
like some days
Mm-hmm.
I would be gloomy, right, and be pessimistic, but I'd say overall I mean, the scale to me is a bit more optimistic. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
watch outs. I think we need to definitely be concerned. And I think, it's not so binary because I think there are some things to be concerned about. I think it's subtle things. It's not robots taking over or, yeah, we're all going to be unemployed and basically doing nothing. And, everything's going to be run by machines, at least not in our lifetimes, I don't think. But it's more nuanced, like loss of critical thinking or dependence or dependence even on AI for relationships and again not kind
Mm-hmm.
of sort of taking control that way. But I think there's tons of positives in terms again that term intelligence. I think there's a lot of optimism for consumers and businesses to be more efficient and to get at the answers. So the advice I'd give my students is specifically when it comes to like careers and getting a job is, and you've probably
Yeah.
heard this, is like you've got to be better than the AI. Sorry, maybe not better, but like different. And you need to sort of
Mm-hmm.
figure out what
Mm-hmm.
is your added value because you do have added value. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like the
Yeah.
machines can completely and AI can completely do everything that you're doing. That's just I don't believe that. So
Yeah.
they're going to be good at something, you're going to be good at something else, and you got to add that value. And you got to figure that out because if you're not, then and this is the dilemma right now with businesses, they're just going to hire AI to do those jobs, right? So that's one thing. And I think students really need to figure out like, what's the sort of human-esque thing that they can contribute to when it comes to this, and to embrace the technology. And I would also say too, I've been thinking about this a lot, is that
Yeah.
find that sort of inner thing that like really you know motivates you and makes you curious and try to double down on that. I think that's where you kind of can end up kind of adding value if you're just kind of blindly going through it and sometimes I do worry. It's like, are you going to become just a slave to the machine and slave to AI because you're not sort of thinking things through? So like, be different or better than the AI, and kind of like find that thing that you want, and again, embrace the technology and experiment with the technology as well, because you're going to be using it more and more and more.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. I like that perspective for sure. And Scott, you and I were chatting just before this video call as well. And if I might add, I would suggest that perhaps some of the extra value that we bring to the table is, I think we brought it down to 3 points. We said the
Yep.
initiative, judgment, and accountability. And I think that those three are probably something to keep in mind for sure. Absolutely. So good advice to the students. Absolutely. In terms of going forward. With that, I would like to thank you. So, Professor Scott Campbell, again, thank you very much for joining us on this discussion and this journey. Scott is a professor of marketing at Seneca College in Toronto and working on marketing and AI research. So, thank you also to our viewers for joining us. See you next time on Responsible AI in Action.